Well, where is the most corrupt country on earth? There are plenty vying for the dubious title. According to Transparency International, more than 1 in 4 people around the world paid a bribe in the last 12 months. Bucking the trend is the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. The figure there is just 4%, lower even than the UK's 5%. It's particularly remarkable for a country like Georgia, where corruption until relatively recently was rampant. So how have the Georgians done it? And have they really been able to conquer corruption? Steve Rosenberg travelled to the Georgian capital Tbilisi to find out. We should warn you, there is some acting in this film.
This is the story of a country where corruption was king.
You would work for the police, you had to pay bribe to get the job.
You knew that this was absolutely common to pay a bribe in Georgia for their passport.
It's a country which tried to change by declaring war on those who were skimming the system. But were the politicians who were fighting corruption committing their own crimes?
Government was acting like a criminal gang. It was very well organized criminal organization.
This is the story of Georgia.
Only a decade ago, Georgia was being described as one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Everything here was under the table. For example, if you wanted to register a company or obtain a construction permit, you had to give a bribe. If you wanted to get into a good university, guarantee good grades and a degree at the end of it, then again, greasing someone's palm was the way to do it. Sometimes people even had to give bribes to get their lights switched on at home because there were power shortages, or to secure certain jobs. A good example was the traffic police. People used to pay huge sums of money, massive backhanders, just to get a job there. And once they had, the traffic policemen themselves started taking bribes so they could recoup their losses. The result was a system that was rotten from top to bottom.
Even my predecessor, President Georgian, was repeating it continuously. He was saying, in Georgia, everybody is corrupt. You know, and he would say, a school teacher is corrupt, a policeman is corrupt, a doctor is corrupt, a minister is corrupt. So by that, first of all, and by the way, he was, in a way, he was right. But then he was justifying by that, being corrupt himself. And then he actually said, okay, so it's part of culture. So what can you do about it? Just part of our culture, part of our identity. So that's how it should be. And there is not much I'm going to do about it, so I'll just be part of it.
In 2003, things changed. Incensed by rampant corruption and a rigged parliamentary election, people power swept away the old guard. Mikhail Saakashvili became the new president and promised Georgians something they'd never really had before: transparent government. For a start, new see-through police stations were built across Georgia, shiny symbols of this new transparency. Suddenly, the public could keep a close eye on their constables, helping to make Georgian police more accountable and less corrupt. Police training was transformed too, with the introduction of an American-style police academy. Out went the old Soviet-era textbooks and teaching methods. In came training programs from the West and the latest technology to produce a modern, professional force. One of the biggest changes was on the roads. The government sacked all the traffic police, 16,000 officers, and replaced them with this US-style patrol force. New recruits were monitored closely to make sure they didn't take any bribes.
Many people try to give police officers money, but from the past many things was changed. Nowadays everyone knows that police officers don't take the money.
But it's not only the police that became more transparent. The Georgian government opened giant public service palaces. Transactions that were once under the table were now out in the open. Here, Georgians can get everything from ID cards to company registrations without a bribe. Set prices and computer databases have squeezed out corruption.
The main idea is that the public service hall operators don't have any interaction with money and with their fee payment procedures. I do remember when I was 16 years old and when I was firstly asked to bring bribe for my own passport. But right now, people are coming here, just taking a photo in the public service hall, and that's it. They do not need any other documents.
Georgia began to be seen as the world leader in fighting corruption. It was a remarkable turnaround. After cleaning up its act in things like police patrols and public services, Georgia seemed to have accomplished a mission impossible. From being right down near the bottom of the global league table on transparency, it rose to a ranking higher than some EU states. Because of this success, for several years now, Georgia has been flying. The country has been praised for its achievements by the World Bank, the United States, the European Union. But increasingly, Georgians have found that their shiny new system of openness, accountability and transparency has strict limits. Mamia Sanadiradze used to own one of Georgia's largest telecom companies. He claims that the same government that was fighting corruption was putting pressure on his business. The problems began, he says, when the Interior Ministry asked him to facilitate secret surveillance of internet users. He refused. Soon after, Mr. Sanadiradze says, some of his cables were cut. Then, out of the blue, he received a fine from the tax office.
If I had not paid £5 million, I was getting in jail. So I had no choice. I had to transfer the company to under the control of the governmentally well-connected business groups. They were clever. They were using basically the state institutions, the Ministry of Interior, Chief Prosecutor's Office, tax police, to find and push the rich individuals in Georgia to give up their properties.
Givi Maisuradze did go to jail. His sister, who lives abroad, had bought a section of an old gas pipeline in Georgia that was being auctioned off. 2 years ago, Givi was arrested and told his sister's pipeline must be given back to the state as a gift.
I spent 4 months in prison. Every evening I could hear people screaming, as if they were being tortured. I was a hostage. My sister said, "You're a hostage because of me." So she signed the papers and handed the pipeline over. 2 days later, I was freed.
Last October, President Saakashvili's party was voted out of office. Saakashvili remained president, but there was a new government. It was headed by his rival, the billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili. In his view, the previous administration had controlled business, abused its power, and had only partially tackled corruption.
When it comes to fighting corruption on the low and medium levels, then I think our predecessors were successful. But what happened was that the money, which previously had been divided up among the lower levels, was being shared by a small group of people higher up. This was elite corruption.
Your opponents say you've done well in fighting low-level and middle-level corruption, but they say that under your administration, elite corruption was flourishing.
You can say that there was not judiciary was not totally independent. I would agree with that. You would say that prosecutors were somehow overstretching their limits. I would agree with that. But nobody was taking bribes. Nobody was stealing money. We made sure that even when, and the reason why sometimes they overstretched beyond when they were beyond their limits was to drive not to allow corruption back in our country.
Started to cover myself in paint.
But there have been some embarrassing revelations recently about the president and what he may have been doing with taxpayers' money. He reportedly spent some on naked body art by actress Meredith Ostrom. At the Georgian parliament, MPs say they have evidence that the president has been spending public money on private whims. They claim to have obtained expense records showing that President Saakashvili spent thousands of pounds from his security budget on luxury hotel rooms in Singapore. Here's that naked painting, and on beauty treatments in New York, including Botox injections. The president is furious. How could anyone even suggest he needs de-wrinkling?
Look at, here I am. Can you look at me? Look at me. Can you see any? Look at Prime Minister, at his friend Vladimir Putin, and you see the difference. So here I am. You don't have to go far. So the point here is, it's all they could claim and find. Where are all these millions, billions misspent, stolen? Nowhere, because this country was clean.
If that's true, why then are a string of President Saakashvili's former ministers now under investigation? Is it because Georgia is taking the fight against corruption to a whole new level, as the new government claims? Or is this about settling scores? That isn't clear, but the international community is watching closely.
We expect Georgia to respect the rule of law and ensure people due process. And we encourage the Georgian authorities to do all they can to avoid even the perception that these legal cases are politically motivated.
Georgia has achieved so much, so fast. Never in its history has corruption been so difficult here to conceal. But the story of Georgia shows that shiny palaces themselves are no guarantee of total transparency or rule of law. Not if Georgian politicians from all sides, in their glass houses, are still throwing stones.
Steve Rosenberg, well, that's all we have time.